My former spouse ran up a big tax debt. Is there anything I can do to get out of it? That's actually a three-part question, and we're going to deal with one of those parts in this video. Hi, my name's Darrin Mish, and I'm a tax attorney with a national practice based in Tampa, Florida. During my 15 years of practice, there are questions that arise again and again, and so I thought I'd take this opportunity to answer some of those questions in this video format. There are 20 videos altogether, and if you'd like to have access to the other 19 videos, please visit my website at getirshelpvideos.com. Now, what we're talking about here today is what's called innocent spouse, but more particularly equitable relief. What does equitable relief mean? Well, equitable relief basically means it would be unfair in order for the taxpayer to have to pay the taxes of the former guilty spouse. So there's actually several elements, or six, and I'm going to go ahead and go over those 6 elements for you so you can understand what you need to do in order to qualify for equitable relief. The first is you need to know that the tax liability needs to have been filed or emanated from what's called a jointly filed return. So you need to have filed a tax return using the married filing joint tax return status or filing status. If you didn't, then there's really no point. See, if you file separate, then you already are not liable for the wrongdoings of your spouse, because that's exactly why that the married filing separate filing status exists. Head of household will be the same thing. If you file head of household, that means you're a single parent raising at least one child in the home by yourself, then you also would not be deemed responsible for the wrongdoings of your spouse. So you need to have filed a jointly filed or married filing joint return. The second is, are you eligible otherwise for innocent spouse relief, either under classic innocent spouse relief or what's called separation of liability? And those two issues are actually covered in different videos in this series. So I would urge you to go ahead and go to the website and check those out. But there's also another aspect to this particular element, and that is, are you eligible for relief under community property law in some other way? Now, I'm not going to go ahead and try to recite the community property states. All you need to know, or all you need to do in order to find out what states are community property states, is go to Google and type in community property states, and all 16 will appear on someone else's website. They tend to be out west, with the exception of Louisiana and Wisconsin, and they carry over older or certain elements of Spanish civil law to married couples. And so in some states, particularly out west, you may be eligible for relief under community property law in some regards, and if you were, then this particular aspect of innocent spouse would not be available to you. Now, the second or the third element actually is that you file or fail to file your return with the intent to commit fraud. See, if you intended to commit fraud, then the IRS is not going to give you equitable relief. If they did, that would be actually unfair to the IRS, unfair to the government, and so it stands to reason that if you intended to commit fraud, and I think that that's relatively rare, then you would actually not be eligible for relief under this subsection. Did you pay the tax is the next element. If you paid the tax, then the IRS is going to take the position that you've already paid it. It's not something where they're going to refund it, because they're not going to take the hit even though the tax has already been paid. So you're not going to get a windfall for the wrongdoing of your former guilty spouse, and I think that also makes sense. The next element is, are you able to show, I beg your pardon, did you or your spouse or former spouse transfer property to one another as part of a fraudulent scheme? And I think this sort of piggybacks on the last element that we just talked about. And that is, if you're part of a fraudulent scheme to defraud the government in some way, or to usually convey property, for example, you conveyed property to your Aunt Lillian for $10, real property meaning real estate, for $10 so that you could later apply for innocent spouse relief, no go. IRS is not going to go for that. That's not going to be something that's going to work in this particular aspect. So you can't have been involved in a fraudulent scheme. And you can just think of it, if I committed fraud, or if I had any part to committing fraud, then I'm not going to get innocent spouse relief. I think that would be a fair way to remember it. And the last element is actually, are you able to show that it would be unfair to hold you liable? Now, that's an interesting question. What does that mean? Well, unfair in this particular instance means that you would be unable to pay. So the IRS is going to go through a lengthy financial process. They're going to ask you to fill out what's called Form 433A, and with documentation, and they're going to request that you justify that you have no ability to pay the tax back. What does that have to do with being unfair? Well, I guess the IRS believes that if you have the money, then it's not unfair. I don't make the rules, folks. I just interpret them. That's about all the time I have for today. If you'd be interested in seeing the other 19 videos, then I suggest you visit our website at getirshelpvideos.com.